Ocean Crew. Tonight I'm going to be looking at the film The Amityville Horror from 1979, based on the book of the same name from 1977 written by Jay Anson. Like I said in my last movie review of Aliens from 1986, this movie is right up there with my all-time favorites. The Amityville Horror from 1979, an American horror based on the true life story of a young couple named Kathy and George Lutz, who purchased a home in Amityville, New York, where a mass murder occurred the year before, only to find it is haunted by a supernatural force. Directed by Stuart Rosenburg, starring James Brolin, Margot Kidder, and Rod Steiger. Horror was really popular back then in the late 70s, early 80s, kind of just like it is right now, which is pretty cool. That's my favorite genre of movie. When the Amityville Horror came out in 1979 in theaters, I was 11. Can't believe that, but I was 11. And because of the rating, us kids couldn't go see the film unless we had an adult accompaniment, I think. I can't remember exactly. I'll have to look that up. I feel like maybe it was rated R, but you know, you couldn't get in unless you had an adult with you. So we had to wait until it came out on VHS tape or was shown on television later. So I grew up in northwestern Ontario, Canada, and when I was that age, I had a close-knit little group of friends, and oftentimes in the summer, we would go hang out in the back laneway and sit on the grass and talk about stuff. And this one really good friend of mine was fortunate enough to have an older friend who got her into the movie. So everybody was interested in the book at that time because the movie was coming out. My sister and my mom and everybody would read the book, so we kind of had access to that. But in this little gathering, she got to go see the movie, so she came back and she described every detail of the film as though we were watching it on the grass there, and we were all mesmerized, terrified, but mesmerized, and we really wanted to see it. So like I said, we had to wait probably until it came out a few months later on television. I remember we were absolutely crazy about the whole idea of Jody the pig with the red eyes in the window, and also all of the flies in the room with the priest. We just couldn't wait to see it. Okay, and this video is gonna kind of be all over the place. There's so much information and so much stuff that I can talk about with it, and I want to pack in as much as possible. It was such a good movie, and there's so much cool stuff surrounding it. And I just want to say I'm kind of in the middle as far as believing the whole story goes. I don't completely believe that it was fake, but I do think that a lot of people capitalized on it or tried to capitalize on it. The movie itself, everybody knows, was a huge success, and I'm talking back then when I was 11, it was a big deal. Whether you liked horror or not, everybody was talking about it. It was really, really a big deal. It had a budget of $4.7 million, and it did well over $16 million in the box office. So for an independent film, that was just unheard of. That was crazy. That was a lot of money back then too. A lot of money. Nowadays, with the way things are, movies seem to flip over so quickly, and a lot of them you don't even get to see, or there's not much, there's not much staying power with a particular movie because things are so fast and furiously flipped over. Back then, the movie there'd be a lot of talk. There usually was a book based to it. There'd be a lot of talk of it. The movie would be announced and come out in the theaters. It would sit in the theaters for a while before it left. As long as it was popular, it would stay. And then it would go to smaller theaters. And then I believe within a few months, it would head to the video store and go onto VHS tape. And then about a year later, it would be on TV for you to see, and then of course they would just show it regularly on television, just regular television, not even cable or anything. So it was kind of a neat time back then, how movies came out, how you got to really know them and understand them, compared to nowadays, I feel. Alright, so James Brolin and Margot Kidder starring in the film. They were both skeptics, apparently. I remember that at the time too, them doing interviews. They were kind of skeptical of the whole ghosty thing, haunted house thing. But they did the movie anyways. I think Margot Kidder was a lot more skeptical than James Brolin. And of course there's that story of how he didn't get the script fast enough, so he went and got a copy of the book and he read the book, and late at night, you know, while he was reading the book, his pants fell off of a hanger, and that kind of freaked him out and made him want to do the movie. He took that as a sign or something. Now, Margot Kidder was skeptical right through the whole thing. She said that the producers were telling them to come up with these crazy, you know, fictitious stories of ghosts and tell them to all the reporters and in interviews and that kind of thing. But to be fair, they didn't really film at the house. They visited it once, I think. They were filming on set and in a different location, so I don't really know how they could have had like access to proving whether it was real or not, whether these things happened or not. You know, and I'm not saying they did. I certainly wasn't there. I don't know for sure. But I kind of, because of some of the things that happened, I lean towards the fact that it's possible that these things did happen. And I absolutely, completely stand behind the theory that, you know, people were trying to cash in on it, capitalize on it. But if you look at that, these were people making a movie. Of course, they were trying to make money doing it. And the person writing the book, they want to sell books. And lawyers, I mean, do lawyers, I mean, come on, you know, these are people that would capitalize on making money off of something. So I think you have to separate that side of it from the actual people involved in the whole thing. I mean, this was a horrific crime that happened in this house. Very big deal for back then. Wow, I mean, this kid kills his whole family. That's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. You have to think that there'd be something dark in him to do that kind of thing, and then something dark in that house that would kind of be residual there afterwards as well. Like I say, I don't know for sure. Maybe it's not true. You know, maybe it was bullshit, but back in the day, having seen it and been a part of that era, I lean more towards that parts of it were at least true. One little fun fact that I found was that the film itself was invited to premiere at the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, before it went on to go to theaters in LA and New York. So I thought that was kind of cool. It would have been fun to have, you know, flown out there at that time to go to the museum and see that film. I think that would have been a cool experience, but like I said, I was 11 and my dad didn't really love traveling, so that didn't happen for me. But the people that got to do it, I think that's right on. And there were mixed reviews, like I said, for the film, and I think even today there's kind of two sides, well, maybe three sides. You either completely think it's bullshit, or you believe it, or you're kind of halfway between. But I have to say, back in the day when it came out, it was incredibly popular, regardless of whether it was true or not. I think people just enjoyed the idea that it was this true story and that it was really scary and it was really well made, the movie itself. And, you know, that's kind of how I look at it today as well. Roger Ebert, back in the day, had a show with Gene Siskel. It was Siskel and Ebert. We used to watch it. I mean, there was no internet back then, so we didn't have as much access to stuff, you know, commentary and criticism and that kind of thing. But Siskel and Ebert was the show that you watched to see what the film was about, or to kind of learn more about the film. So Roger Ebert was sort of the negative guy. He would say negative stuff about films and draw up all that controversy about it. And Gene Siskel would always be more positive about films. And that was kind of their thing. That was their thing. That was the way they ran that show. So for him saying something negative about that film, that was pretty standard for him with a lot of films. It was very rare that he picked a film that he raved about and thought was really phenomenal back then. He was quoted as saying it was dreary and terminally depressing, you know, but that was how he did stuff back then. It made people actually want to watch the movie because of that kind of controversy. There were so many spin-offs, like over 20 of them connected to the storyline in Amityville, and oh, it just goes all over the place. It's crazy. Some of them were so bad. Even the remake in 2005, I didn't really care for that. It was not the same. I think Amityville Horror is one of those movies that, you know, you want more of it, but it was kind of a classic. I don't think it can be redone, and it's certainly not the storyline where you would have sequels to it. The prequel one was kind of a neat idea, but I think it was kind of weird too. They did touch on some pretty heavy topics like incest and unsanctioned exorcisms, that kind of thing. So that was kind of neat, I guess. But yeah, all the spin-offs and things are pretty hokey. I think my favorite thing over the years was hearing interviews with the people actually involved in it, and Lorraine Warren and the Lutzes. That was very cool. It's very sad that they're passed away now. I wouldn't mind having had a chance to chat with them in an interview or that kind of thing, but you know, it is what it is. It was a long time ago that that movie came out. I mean, it feels like it was yesterday, but it was a long time ago. I recently tried to reach out to Tony Spira to score an interview. As you know, I've done interviews and that kind of thing, but he hasn't got back to me, so I expect he's probably pretty busy. And I think, and that was going to be to do with The Conjuring, the newest Conjuring film. I would love to chat with him about Ocean Drive and Lorraine's experiences there. I think that would be really cool. Maybe one day. I'll keep trying and keep you posted. The real-life killings of the DeFeo family committed by Ronald DeFeo Jr. are pretty horrifying. And I think one thing that's making me feel like maybe there was something dark with him is the way that they were found. The bodies were found all laying face down on their beds and not moving around. And the fact that he didn't have a silencer on his gun, and then it was one of those old homes, you know. The old homes were very thin-walled and not as private and secured as homes are maybe nowadays. And so I find it very strange he was able to pull that off in that way. And the fact that the coroner couldn't find any drugs in their systems, and just how he grew up in such a, you know, kind of a bad childhood, which was, you know, that was pretty typical back then, that kind of thing. And he got into the wrong crowds and the wrong kind of stuff. I think it's entirely possible that something dark attached to him, causing him to commit that kind of crime at that level and do that kind of thing. Did the house cause him to do it? I don't know. Maybe, you know, maybe he had something in him that he brought to that house. Could he have left kind of residual energy from the crime that he committed and all of that happened? Yeah, totally think so. From the stuff I've seen with the ghost hunting people, yeah, totally. My dad was a deacon for the Catholic Church, which I've said before, when he was alive, and they actually perform exorcisms. I mean, that's a thing, and they don't talk about it much, and they keep it very private because apparently it's not a good thing to draw attention to negative spirits and negative energy. It just doesn't, it gives them power, and it you know, can cause a lot of trouble. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible that that kind of thing happened with him. Another thing from that, the way the deaths happened, I just find it really, I have a daughter, and you know, if you could hear noises, I mean, the two parents each had 2 gunshot wounds, and each of the kids had 1 to kill them. Why would the kids be all laying that way? I mean, he didn't position them that way. They were killed that way. Even if you, okay, you got a big house, you don't have a silencer on the gun, it's very loud. By the time you get to, you know, maybe the parents being killed could have happened, you know, boom, boom, done, walks out. But during the whole course of the evening, killing them, I find it really hard to believe that none of the kids would have, you know, fled for their life, like hid in a closet or under the bed, or there wasn't some sort of a struggle. I find that kind of strange. That is really hard to wrap my head around, and I couldn't really find anything that explained that other than it is what it is. And they weren't drugged or anything either, so that part I just can't, you know, wrap my head around in thinking that the whole thing was a hoax. It was just a money-making scheme. So Ronald DeFeo Jr. was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences of 25 years in prison. There was no chance he was getting out. And he recently passed away this past March, actually, in prison. A year later, the Lutzes, Kathy and George, just saw the house was on the market. It was 80 grand, right? It was super cheap because of the murders that had happened. And they grabbed it. I mean, anybody would have. That was an amazing deal for that kind of a house, that size, where it was located on Ocean Drive. Wow. I mean, crazy. I would have, even though the murders happened in there and it would have been kind of a little bit weird to live there, I would have grabbed that house. I'd still love to own that house. I wish I could own that house and open it up to investigations, and oh, I would love that. But I know that because of everything that happened, when the whole thing first happened, of course, and the movie came out, thousands of people were like showing up at the doorstep, really weird people wanting to investigate and just they wanted to take pieces of the house away with them, all of that kind of thing. And it was just a gong show in that neighborhood. So the new owners that got it after the Lutzes obviously had to do something about it and stop that from happening. And I'm wondering if even the city had some sort of regulations put up with that jurisdiction so that people couldn't do that anymore. Because I know from ghost hunting channels, everybody tries to go there, and you can't even stop walking on the sidewalk to look at the place without someone coming out and kicking you out, or drive by or park or go to the property or anything like that. And they won't really let people in for investigations either. So kind of ruined it for everybody else, those people that did that back in the day. Although I could see why it happened, because the movie was very popular and it's kind of a crazy story. So the Lutzes moved in a year later, and then after 28 days of staying there, they just booked it. They just ditched all their stuff. Lorraine Warren, I saw in an interview, she was talking about how the food was still left on the stove, that they were cooking that night. George had 2 custom motorbikes that he left there. Everything was just left and they just ditched. So they thought that why would people do that if they were, for whatever reason, why would they do that? That seems pretty crazy. Kathy Lutz had 3 kids to a previous relationship, and George was their stepdad. She had 2 sons and a daughter. They're grown up now. So the daughter apparently doesn't say one way or the other whether things were weird or happened like that. The sons do, though. The sons say those kinds of things happened. They do clarify that there was a lot of embellishment happening in the movies, that kind of thing. But of course there would be. Why movies are always created that way, where they embellish the facts. It doesn't mean that their stories were fake or a lie because the movie changed the whole thing a bit. They have to make it more dramatic so that more people go see the movie, so that the movie's more enjoyable and they make more money off of it. I think that's pretty obvious. I find that funny when people comment on that it was fake. The green slime didn't actually happen. Red Room wasn't like that. Well, of course it wasn't. They had to make it into a movie. It had to be more dramatic, more showy for the movie so that people would go see it and buy a ticket. I find that really funny. Like I said, I don't know for a fact that the stories are true. I don't know that the place was haunted. I don't know that these things happened for a fact because I wasn't there. I'm leaning a bit more towards that some stuff happened. I think it seems pretty obvious that that's the case. But the new families that moved into the homes say they experienced nothing. And my thinking behind that is, maybe they're skeptics and they just don't believe in stuff, and they pass everything off that happens as something else. That's totally possible. Ed and Lorraine Warren were called to that space to help. I expect they would have cleansed the space, and that was all part of the deal of why they were there. So if that was the case, maybe new owners wouldn't have experienced anything afterwards, because maybe the place was cleansed. Kathy and George Lutz have since passed away. Kathy died in 2004 and George died in 2006. Kathy of emphysema and George of heart disease. Heart disease is kind of interesting because Lorraine Warren was in an interview talking about how she felt that a lot of the people connected to the investigation actually had heart problems afterwards, like that things from it kind of carried over and followed them, So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's true or not, coincidence. I mean, that was kind of a common thing to have back in the day, heart problems and liver disease and emphysema, smoking, drinking, all that kind of thing. Because of all the stuff that happened when the movie first came out to the house itself, that house has been altered. The new owners have changed, so the windows aren't the same as in the movie. From what I gathered from James Brolin, the reason they didn't film in the house itself is because it was pretty small, so it would have been really awkward to do filming in there. I know they film a lot of stuff here on Vancouver Island and in Vancouver and that, and Places are often looked at but turned down because the space itself is too small to have all the lighting and equipment and everything in there to film. So they opted for studio and then another location to do the filming of this movie. And I don't know if you guys know, but there's an official Ed and Lorraine Warren channel on YouTube. I've watched lots of those videos. I think I remember the show itself that's been re-uploaded back in the day, watching that as well. But I watched an episode about Amityville, about their investigation, and the two of them talk about it specifically, so I'm going to share a little bit of that here. Ed, when he went, they got called to the location to do an investigation, so they had to, you know, walk through and examine to see what was going on. And Ed recalled going down into the cellar, and he said, evil tends to gravitate towards dark places. It doesn't like the light. So when he went down into the cellar to walk, he immediately felt a big heaviness come over him. He was clutching a crucifix when he went down there, and it was so heavy that he fell to his knees from it, and knew to get out of there, that there was something really dark and really bad there. Lorraine, when she first got there, she knew nothing really about the case or the story of it. She was there to go through and investigate the house to get her feeling of it, and she was clutching her Padre Pio statue. Padre Pio was a priest, and he actually suffered the stigmata, and after he died, they deemed him a saint. So I love Padre Pio, actually. That's someone that I hold close to my heart and pray to. My dad did too. Anyway, that aside, she was clutching the statue, and she went up upstairs into the room, and she felt a very heavy feeling as well, and kind of a dizzying feeling when she got up there, and she knew there was something in that house. Lorraine entered the sewing room that was there. It was decorated as a sewing room, and she said that place she felt this overwhelming feeling of heaviness and just awful, that she said, I hope this is the closest I ever get to hell, in this room. And that room was the room where the actual priest that went there to bless the house was in, where there was all the flies, and he was slapped in the face too. Those things actually happened from what they told. I think she had said that it was really hard to get to talk to him about it or get him to say anything about it. But like I said before with the church, that's how it was back then. They didn't draw attention to anything that was going on, and it was really tough to get them to verify something that as being an evil spirit or a haunting or a possession or anything like that. Probably so that things wouldn't turn into a big gong show and they could deal with the problem. Ed also offered $3,000 back in the day, which was a lot of money, to anyone who could disprove the whole thing and deem it a hoax with proof. He would give them $3,000, and nobody ever came forward for that money. So Lorraine talked about the fact that the church, I guess, the priest had said to them, don't take your stuff with you from the house, I guess, because from what I've learned from ghost hunting shows, objects can have things attached to them, so they left all their stuff there. And she found it peculiar that why would these people leave every single one of their belongings, all their personal photos, mementos, prized possessions, everything, leave it all behind in such a quick moment's notice and just never go back for it and never take it. So she said that right there was something. I kind of get that feeling like they and the group that were investigating it were kind of on a different level doing what they were doing compared to the movie people and the book people and, the lawyers and all that kind of thing. So that I find kind of intriguing as well. Like, why would they, be kind of, they did their job and then they moved on to the next job. And apparently, like, they dealt with thousands and thousands of cases of this kind of stuff. And I don't care what anybody says. From the things that have happened in my life and what I believe, I think that shit's out there. I think it's pretty hard to dispute. I look at it in terms of, why are we here? How did we get here? What's our purpose for being here? And what happens afterwards? Like, I refuse to believe that we're here and we go back into the earth and that's it. I think there's a bigger picture here. Whatever you want to believe in is fine. I totally am open to all of that, and everybody should have their own way of thinking and their own opinions about the whole thing. But I feel like some of this stuff was true. Apparently, shortly before all of this stuff happened, Ronald DeFeo Jr., the dad, went to Montreal and he bought these religious artifacts and statues and put them all over the front lawn. And his thinking was that there was a devil in that house that needed to be dealt with. And of course, Ed said that would have been the son, Ronald DeFeo Jr. So there was lots of weird stuff going on there. So that's kind of an interesting thing too, that he went to that extreme to do that. And Ed talked about that diabolical spirits love tragedy. And you know, there's lots of stories out there like that of hauntings and tragic things that have happened where bad spirits or bad energy has attached to someone, and you know, things happen in their life. And I think there's something to that. In the years that I've been alive on this earth, I think there's something to it. I think it's a possibility. Absolutely. Ed and Lorraine talked about this really negative energy and heavy feeling in the house when they went to investigate. And they brought up the Red Room. Well, the Red Room itself wasn't like it was portrayed in the movie at all. They admit that. It was, you know, this big room that was red. It was just this little kind of cubby underneath the staircase down in the basement that apparently Ronald DeFeo Jr. had kept like all this witchcraft kind of stuff in that because he was dabbling in that. I think that's what it was. But anyway, that's the Red Room. And it's kind of funny because back in the day, my parents' house, basements weren't totally finished off or, you know, set up like they are nowadays. And so basically the floor was just painted, the concrete was painted, you know, it was unfinished. My mom had like a massive freezer downstairs for extra food that she had prepared ahead. And, you know, there were always cases of pop downstairs because, you know, your Coke and your Pepsi and that kind of thing was always downstairs in the basement because it was cooler down there, so it would keep the pop cool. So we had this unfinished basement. There was kind of a room that was like a bedroom off to the side, and there was a main area, and there was the laundry area. And in the laundry area, there was a bathroom that wasn't finished. And for some weird reason, my mom had painted the concrete brick wall red. And it always looked kind of wet, like blood. Well, when this movie came up, and you know, you were the one that had to go run downstairs to get some pop, I would literally run down as fast as I could, grab the pop, and double step it up the stairs to get back upstairs because I thought something was gonna grab me. I was so scared. Did anybody else have that kind of thing in their basements back then? I'd sure love to hear about it. Ah, the good old days. During the investigation, the Lutzes took polygraph tests. They passed. You know, and I know they don't hold water, but you know, they do polygraph tests even nowadays when someone commits a murder, and it's used to further investigate that person. It's the score from the movie, which, you know, that music is just epic. It's epic. It was nominated for an Academy Award back then, but as far as academies go and things like that, I remember back then horror movies weren't really put on the map as far as those kinds of things went. They weren't recognized as being like a serious movie for some reason, not like nowadays. My favorite 3 scenes in the movie, I had to have 3 because it's hard to just choose one. I love the red eyes in the window with Jody the pig. I love the get out with the priest scene. And I loved the passageway to hell, the red room, where the friend that psychic goes down and says the passageway to hell. Those are my favorite scenes, I think, in the whole film. And that concludes the hodgepodge of this video for you. There's so much stuff to talk about with this movie. I could just go on and on and on and on. I'll make that a part 2 though. But I just wanted to kind of get it all out instead of trying to organize it all. And I really want to know what you guys think of it. Do you think it was a hoax? Do you think it was real? What parts do you like? What don't you like? Let me know in the comment section below, and then we can chat about it. Oh, I'd love to do that so much. Alright guys, if you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up because that helps me out a lot, and subscribe to the channel so I can do more things like this. And suggest movies that you want me to review too, because I would love that. I think that makes it more fun. And I just want to say, I hope you guys are having a great day. You have a great weekend, and I love you all, and I will see you again next week with some new recipes and more movie reviews. See you later, guys.